January 25th, 1680. A man named Joshua G. set sail from Boston Harbor to the Mediterranean on terms of trade. Not long into their journey, an Algerian ship attacked and boarded their vessel. G. was taken back to Algiers, where he was sold as a slave. During his 7 years of captivity, he was sold frequently between Algiers. To avoid harsh punishments, he worked long hours under the sun while building ships for his master. He never thought of his plans for escaping, and he accepted frequent insults from Algerians as a play toy. For instance, he was being threatened of having his eyes dug out from him the following day by his master for no apparent reason, and only return the next day to find it a terrible joke. When a slave successfully escaped captivity from his master, the Algiers physically tortured all the rest cruelly in order to establish the master's authority. G is just one example of the many seamen who were captured and enslaved by the Barbary corsairs. Little did they know that their experiences would be one of the catalysts to a war that would shape the United States into the power it is today. The Barbary States were a collection of small allied countries running along the coast of northern Africa. It consisted of Morocco, Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli, extending 2,000 miles across from Egypt to the Atlantic. These 4 countries were sea-based Islamic states, governed by monarchs known as Deys. But more importantly, they were well acquainted with the practice of privateering, piracy that was sponsored by their own government. Some of the things they did included plundering merchant ships, selling ship crews into slavery, and even holding sailors for ransom.
They would board the victim's ship carrying knives, swords, guns, pikes, whatever they could, screaming threats of massacre unless the victims surrendered.
The Mediterranean and the Atlantic Ocean were both essential parts to global trade, so by use of ransoms, they were able to take advantage of the majority of seafaring countries who did not want to engage in war. Britain was one of these countries. They had signed treaties to give the Barbary States yearly and monthly payments in order to maintain a peace. As long as they kept these payments going, they would be safe. At the time, this included Britain's colonies in North America. But after the American Revolution ended, the protection no longer continued, and the United States were on their own. The financially troubled Confederation government had discontinued its Continental Navy, and after their war with England, they were not in any position to go to war. The Barbary States saw America as another method of obtaining cash, and so it didn't take long before 2 U.S. vessels were captured by Moroccan pirates, and 21 sailors enslaved. Since Morocco was having some succession issues at the time, they went easy on the new nation, requiring them to pay a total of $91,000 for the prisoners and the treaty. Algiers was not as kind, however. Congress struggled to raise enough funds to satisfy Baba Mustafa, the Dey of Algiers. At the time, America was saved by a Portuguese blockade at the Strait of Gibraltar due to a conflict between them and Algiers. However, after a brief Portuguese-Algerian truce, the blockade was removed, allowing Algerian corsairs to enter the Atlantic. In October 1793, Algerian pirate ships within a week had picked up 11 U.S. vessels and captured 106 seamen.
If you are my friends and wish to remain so and wish to preserve your treaty with me, you have sent to me 10 guns brass, 24-pounders with carriages, and also 5 brass guns, 18-pounders with carriages, guns long for batteries. I request you will not forget our friendship.
In 1794, led by John Adams, the U.S. government dispatched diplomats Joel Barlow, Joseph Donaldson, and Richard O'Brien to North Africa and successfully concluded treaties with the state of Algiers. The United States agreed to pay $585,000 in addition to the annual gifts to the Algerian corsairs. The treaty freed 83 American sailors. They also made treaties with Tunis and Tripoli. This was when George Washington and his cabinet realized that they needed a method to defend themselves. 5 years previous, in 1789, the adoption of the Constitution gave the U.S. government the power they needed to levy taxes and to raise and maintain armed forces, powers which had been lacking under the Articles of Confederation. A bill was introduced into Congress appropriating $600,000 for the construction of 6 frigates, 4 with 44 cannons each, and 2 with 36 cannons each. This was the birth of the United States Navy. In 1801, Thomas Jefferson was elected President of the United States. Tripoli saw this as an opportunity to cash in. The Pasha of Tripoli, Yusuf Quaramanli, demanded additional tributes as much as demanded by the other Barbary states. One of Jefferson's first acts as president was to say no.
Thomas Jefferson comes out and says, listen, I'm looking in their eye. I'm understanding these men. The message I get from this meeting is the price is only going to go up, and sooner or later the attacks are going to begin again. I say we fight.
The reason Thomas Jefferson claims he refused is because of principle. Even before Thomas Jefferson succeeded over the office, he saw the tributes that the United States paid to the Barbary states as a dishonorable and shameful course.
The legislature will doubtless consider whether, by authorizing measures of offense also, they will place our force on an equal footing with that of its adversaries.
He was someone greatly moved by the enslavement of his citizens. It was painful for him to think about them working their hearts away in a foreign land. He had proposed to George Washington that an impost on all European ships visiting U.S. ports to be used to finance the policing of the Mediterranean. When nothing came of that, he suggested a fund be raised that would eventually solve the issue. He also proposed the formation of the League of Maritime Nations, which would patrol the seas, but European countries, distrusting one another, would not work together. As Jefferson was the most active in trying to solve this issue, it is understandable as to why he would take the moral high ground and not give in to the demands of these pirates. But is it possible that there were ulterior reasons for the refusal to pay these tributes? Yes, in fact it is. The strain that the Navy, as well as the previously paid tributes, had on America's financial state could have led to a situation in which the United States could no longer meet the large demands of the pirates. Jefferson did, after all, believe that the tributes were a poor use of money.
Our trade to Portugal, Spain, and the Mediterranean is annihilated unless we do something decisive. Tribute or war is the usual alternative of these pirates. If we yield the former, it will require sums which our people will feel. Why not begin a navy then and decide on war? We cannot begin in a better cause nor against a weaker foe.
Not only has the US been paying the blackmail for some time now, the majority of European countries with much more wealth than the United States have continued to pay without question. So this begs the question, what role did the money play in Jefferson's decision, compared to what he claims his reason to be? Presidents have been known to say things in order to keep a public image, while having different thoughts in private. In this case, it is most likely a combination of both explanations. Thomas Jefferson has been very consistent in his opinion on the situation with the corsairs, so it would make sense that he is motivated to act on his principles. At the same time, the financial situation of the country would further support his ideas, giving him even more reason to believe that this was the best course of action. Although we don't know if the United States would have paid the tributes if they had the money, the primary and widely accepted reason for the refusal is due to principle. Jefferson was convinced the solution would be more honorable, more effective, and less expensive than paying tribute. Because of this, on May 14, 1801, Yusuf Karamanli of Tripoli declared war on the United States by chopping down a flagpole at the American consulate. The newly established navy was put to use, and the United States successfully defeated Karamanli's forces with a combined naval and land assault. The United States paid a ransom for American prisoners in Tripoli, but no more provisions for tribute. This was the first big win for America, and it was only the start. In 1812, the new Dey of Algiers, Haji Ali, rejected the American tribute negotiated in the 1795 treaty and declared war on the United States. The president, now James Madison, continued what Thomas Jefferson had started and requested that Congress declare war on Algiers, which they authorized on March 3, 1815. By then, the Navy had greatly increased in size. They sent a squadron led by Commodore Stephen Decatur to northern Africa. After Decatur had defeated 2 Algerian warships and had captured hundreds of prisoners of war, the new Dey Omar was in a position for negotiation. He accepted Decatur's treaty to exchange US and Algerian prisoners and end the practices of tribute and ransom. The most powerful of the Barbary states had been defeated. Decatur obtained similar treaties from Tunis and Tripoli. The US state ratified the Algerian treaty on December 5, 1815. Right after the total victory from the United States against the Barbary coast, the whole world, or rather the European powers, saw the astonishing capacity and capability of this newborn nation who had just left from its mother Britain. Despite America's young appearance in the world, it has already demonstrated its military power as well as its successful system of government, which flourished politically and economically. The series of Barbary Wars that the United States fought over were essential in building the identity of the mighty superpower it is today. The United States eventually became the strongest power in the world centuries later due to its superior freedom of speech, abundance in different cultures that intermixed with each other, the fresh and radical perspectives from other people, and not only that, but also because of the might that set an early image in the nation's history. Ultimately, the Barbary Wars have also taught Americans to cling to their moral principles and only then to consider other complex factors.